I was certain I'd walk away. Then she said this I had already decided. Not emotionally, logically. I had weighed everything in silence, measured the imbalance, counted the uncertainties, prepared the calm exit I perfected over the years. I was certain I would walk away, and I meant it. There wasn't drama behind my decision, no argument, no betrayal, no explosive moment, just distance growing quietly in places I couldn't ignore anymore. Conversations that felt slightly misaligned, pauses that lingered longer than they used to, moments that felt almost, but not fully, synchronized, almost as dangerous, almost convinces you to stay longer than you should. And I don't stay in almost. So I made peace with it. I told myself it had been meaningful. I told myself not everything meaningful has to last. I told myself I could leave with dignity and composure. I was proud of how calm I felt. Proud of how controlled. Proud that I wasn't chasing or forcing or overanalyzing. I was ready. And then she said something that rearranged everything. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just honestly. We were sitting in a space that didn't demand depth. The kind of setting where people usually keep things light. I was halfway into emotional detachment already, half present, half withdrawn, quietly preparing to step back. She didn't know that. At least I don't think she did. She looked at me, not intensely, not searching, just steadily. And she said, I don't want something that feels easy. I want something that feels real. That's it. No speech, no plea, no pressure. Just that sentence. And it hit me harder than any dramatic confession could have. Because I realized something immediately. I wasn't leaving because it wasn't real. I was leaving because it was. Easy is comfortable. Real is demanding. I had convinced myself that the slight friction I felt was misalignment. But what if it was growth? What if it wasn't incompatibility? But depth, asking to be handled carefully. When she said that, something in me cracked open. Not my heart, my narrative. I had built a clean story in my head. We weren't quite aligned. The timing was slightly off. The rhythm wasn't perfect. Better to exit now before it becomes complicated. It sounded wise, mature, disciplined. But her sentence exposed something underneath my logic. Fear. Fear that real requires vulnerability. Fear that real requires consistency. Fear that real means I can't retreat at the first sign of discomfort. She wasn't asking me to stay. She wasn't asking for promises. She wasn't even directing the sentence at me specifically. But I felt seen in the way someone sees your hesitation before you speak it. And suddenly my certainty didn't feel strong. It felt defensive. I replayed the last few weeks in my mind. The places where I pulled back slightly. The moments I softened my engagement to test distance. The times I told myself, if this fades, I'll be fine. Why was I preparing for fading when she was talking about building? That's when I understood something uncomfortable. I was ready to walk away not because it wasn't working, but because it was starting to matter. Matter changes posture. When something matters, you don't stay neutral, you don't hover, you commit, or you retreat. I was retreating, gracefully, quietly, but retreating. Her sentence forced me to confront that. I don't want something that feels easy. I want something that feels real. Real isn't effortless. Real requires presence. Real asks you to stay when your instinct is to self-protect. I've been mistaking ease for alignment. But alignment sometimes has edges. Edges that smooth out only if you stay. She even knew that sentence interrupted my exit plan. She probably said it as a reflection of her own standards. But standards reveal depth. And depth deserves respect. I looked at her differently in that moment. Not as someone I might lose. As someone I might underestimate if I left too quickly. Walking away suddenly felt premature, like leaving a book halfway through because the plot got complicated. Complicated is a bad, unreal is. And nothing about us felt unreal. It felt layered, it felt unpolished. It felt like something that needed intention, not escape. I realized I had been measuring our connection against comfort instead of truth. Comfort told me, this is slightly harder than expected. Truth told me this is slightly deeper than you're used to. Depth is intimidating when you didn't plan to fall into it. Her sentence didn't convince me to stay. It revealed that I already wanted to. I wasn't walking away because it wasn't real. I was walking away because real demands courage. And that's what changed, not my feelings, my willingness. I stayed that night, not by announcing anything, not by confessing anything dramatic, just by remaining fully present as though halfway out the door. The difference was subtle, but internal. I stopped calculating exit points, stopped scanning for signs that it would collapse, stopped rehearsing the calm goodbye speech in my head. I listened, fully. And for the first time in days, I felt grounded again. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't avoiding it. She said one sentence, but what it exposed was my own hesitation, my own fear of real, my own tendency to retreat before depth solidifies. I was certain I'd walk away. Certain. Composed. Ready. Then she said something simple and honest, and it made me question whether certainty was strength or self-protection disguised as wisdom. Now, I'm not certain about walking away. I'm certain about this. If something feels real, it deserves more than an easy exit. And maybe the reason I can't walk away now is because I finally understand that what we have isn't meant to feel easy. It's meant to feel real. The moment I realized I was protecting myself, not my peace. After she said it, I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't have words, because I had too many. And every one of them felt like it would expose something I've been trying to keep controlled. I don't want something that feels easy. I want something that feels real. That sentence followed me long after the night ended. It echoed in the quiet spaces where I usually feel composed. And the more it echoed, the more uncomfortable I became. I had been telling myself I was choosing peace, that walking away would be mature, that I was recognizing subtle misalignment early instead of forcing something that didn't flow effortlessly. I've always valued flow. But I had confused flow with frictionless. And frictionless isn't always real. Real has texture. It has depth. It asks you to adjust, not escape. When I replayed the past few weeks, honestly, I saw something I hadn't wanted to see. The discomfort I was interpreting as incompatibility wasn't chaos. It was vulnerability. There were moments where she asked thoughtful questions that went deeper than surface-level banter. Moments where she noticed shifts in my tone before I acknowledged them. Moments where silence between us wasn't awkward, it was observant. Those moments unsettled me, not because they were wrong, because they required something from me. Presence, consistency, emotional availability. And that's when I had to admit the truth. I wasn't walking away to protect my peace. I was walking away to protect my comfort. There's a difference. Peace is alignment. Comfort is familiarity. Peace doesn't require you to shrink. Comfort sometimes does. I had grown very skilled at identifying when things might get complicated. And I often exited early, telling myself I was wise for avoiding unnecessary difficulty. But what if the difficulty wasn't dysfunction? What if it was growth? Her sentence forced me to confront that possibility. She didn't say she wanted something dramatic. She didn't say she wanted intensity. She said she wanted real. Real doesn't promise ease. Real promises substance. Substance requires effort, not exhausting effort, intentional effort. I had been hoping for something that felt seamless. But maybe seamless isn't the standard. Maybe sincerity is. I asked myself a question I couldn't ignore anymore. If I walk away now, will it be because it wasn't working? Or because I wasn't willing to work within something that mattered? That question unsettled me more than anything else. Because when I stripped away my rationalizations, I couldn't say things were broken. They were deepening. And deepening feels different than ease. Deepening feels slower. It feels deliberate. It asks you to stay attentive. It exposes your patterns. She was exposing my patterns without even trying. My tendency to retreat when something becomes meaningful, my instinct to maintain slight emotional distance as leverage, my habit of preemptively preparing for loss so I won't be caught off guard. None of those habits make me a bad person. They made me protected. But protection can turn into isolation if you're not careful. When she said she didn't want easy, I realized something painful. I had been trying to keep things easy for myself, keeping my heart half engaged, keeping my expectations low, keeping exits available. Easy protects you from disappointment. Real exposes you to it. But real also gives you something easy never will. Depth. Trust. Connection that doesn't evaporate at the first sign of friction. I started noticing how differently I felt when I allowed myself to lean in instead of step back. Not anxious. Grounded. The discomfort I had labeled as off was actually unfamiliar intimacy. And unfamiliar intimacy can feel destabilizing when you're used to controlling the pace. She wasn't pushing. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't demanding clarity. She was simply present. and her presence was steady enough to reveal my hesitation. The truth is, I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of needing her. That's harder to admit. Needing someone implies vulnerability. It implies dependency. It implies risk. But what I began to understand is that healthy need isn't weakness. It's mutual reliance. It's partnership. It's allowing someone to matter. Matter is what I was avoiding. Not misalignment. Matter. I replayed the tone in her voice when she said that sentence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't pleading. It was grounded. As if she had already accepted that she would rather walk alone than settle for something shallow. That grounded conviction changed my perspective. I didn't want to be someone who walks away because something isn't easy. I wanted to be someone who stays when something is real. That required confronting my own patterns. Confronting my fear of depth. Confronting the part of me that equates simplicity with safety. Safety isn't the goal anymore. Meaning is. I realized that walking away would give me control. But staying would give me growth. Growth doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from staying long enough to understand it. The next time we spoke after that night, I felt different. Not performative, not intense, just aware. Aware that I was choosing presence instead of distance. Aware that I wasn't calculating exits. Aware that I wasn't softening my interest to protect myself. It felt steady. And steadiness is a better sign than fireworks. I don't know where this leads. But I know this much. If I walk away now, it won't be because it wasn't real. It will be because I wasn't brave enough to let it become real. And that's not something I'm willing to live with. Her sentence didn't trap me. It freed me from my own avoidance. It showed me that what I was calling peace was actually preemptive retreat. And retreat isn't peace. It's protection. I was certain I'd walk away. Now I'm certain of something else. If something feels real, it deserves more than my fear. It deserves my presence. And this time I'm choosing to stay long enough to see what real actually becomes. The version of me that almost left, I keep thinking about the version of me that almost walked away. He was calm, composed, certain. He had already rehearsed the quiet explanation. The respectful distance. The dignified fade out that would leave no chaos behind. He would have said something thoughtful about timing, about different rhythms, about not forcing something that didn't feel effortless. He would have sounded mature. He would have believed himself. And he would have been wrong. The more I sit with it, the clearer it becomes. I wasn't leaving because something was broken. I was leaving because something was becoming important. Important is heavier than interesting. Important requires you to show up consistently, not just when it's convenient. Important asks you to lean in instead of hover. Important removes your option to treat something lightly. That weight scared me. I've always respected myself for being self-aware. I pride myself on noticing red flags early, on not ignoring subtle misalignments, on not romanticizing potential when reality feels unclear. But what if I misread the signal? What if what I labeled as misalignment was actually the discomfort of stepping into something meaningful? There's a difference between incompatibility and vulnerability. Incompatibility drains you. Vulnerability unsettles you. And I was unsettled. When she said she didn't want easy, she wanted real. Something inside me reacted before I could intellectualize it. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like exposure. As if she had named something I was actively trying to avoid. Real. Real is layered. Real includes misunderstanding and resolution. Real includes friction that teaches you how to communicate better. Real includes depth that doesn't arrive instantly but builds through attention. Easy doesn't require effort. Real does. The version of me that almost left was allergic to effort that wasn't guaranteed to succeed. He prefers clean beginnings and clean endings. He doesn't like gray areas. He doesn't like staying in the unknown long enough to see if it transforms. He wants clarity early. But clarity early can sometimes be cowardice disguised as wisdom. I started asking myself harder questions. If I leave now, what am I actually preserving? My peace or my fear of needing someone? If I stay, what am I risking? Disappointment or growth? The answers weren't abstract, they were personal. I realized something uncomfortable. I don't struggle with starting things. I struggle with staying when things begin to matter. Starting feels adventurous. Staying feels accountable. And accountability is vulnerable. She didn't ask me to commit. She didn't ask me to promise anything. She simply expressed a standard. She wants real. That's it. And suddenly I was confronted with my own standard. Do I want real too? Or do I want something I can exit without feeling it deeply? The truth is, I do want real. But real requires emotional endurance. It requires patience when conversations feel slightly off. It requires humility when misunderstandings happen. It requires the willingness to say, let's work through this, instead of maybe this isn't it. That willingness is what I was avoiding. There were moments recently where things felt slightly complicated. Not chaotic, just layered. And instead of leaning in, I leaned back. I interpreted that layer as a warning sign. But maybe it was an invitation to grow with someone instead of staying emotionally agile enough to leave. The version of me that almost left thrives on independence. He sees emotional self-sufficiency as strength, and in many ways it is. But independence can become isolation when you don't allow anyone to truly meet you. She was meeting me, not aggressively, not intrusively, but steadily. And steadiness is hard to dismiss once you notice it. After that night, I replayed her sentence in my mind over and over. I don't want something that feels easy. I want something that feels real. It wasn't a demand, it was a declaration, and declarations reveal integrity. She's not looking for convenience, she's looking for connection. That kind of clarity deserves honesty in return. If I walked away after hearing that, it wouldn't be because we weren't aligned. It would be because I wasn't ready to meet her at that depth. That realization changed my posture. Instead of preparing to leave, I started examining why I wanted to. Instead of blaming subtle discomfort, I explored it. And the discomfort wasn't about her. It was about me, about my pattern of exiting when something shifts from exciting to meaningful. Meaningful is different than thrilling. Thrilling gives you dopamine. Meaningful gives you responsibility. Responsibility is steady, and steadiness can feel heavy if you're used to movement. I don't want to be the version of me who leaves because something isn't effortless. I want to be the version who stays because something is honest. Honest doesn't mean perfect. It means transparent. It means aligned. It means worth tending to. There's also something else I had to admit. I was afraid that if I leaned in fully, I would lose control. Control over how much I care. Control over how much I invest. Control over how much I risk. But control has never created depth. Presence has. She didn't challenge me. She revealed me. And once you see yourself clearly, you don't get to hide behind convenient narratives anymore. The version of me that almost left still exists. He's cautious, he's thoughtful, he values his peace. But peace doesn't require distance from everything that challenges you. Sometimes peace requires staying through the challenge. I'm not saying this will last forever. I'm not claiming certainty about the future. I'm claiming responsibility for the present. Responsibility to not misinterpret vulnerability as incompatibility. Responsibility to not walk away from something real just because it's not frictionless. Responsibility to grow instead of retreat. The difference between walking away and staying isn't about intensity. It's about intention. And my intention shifted the moment she said that sentence. Not because she persuaded me, because she reminded me of what I actually want. I want real too. Not easy, not convenient, not shallow. Real. And real requires courage. The courage to stay, the courage to be consistent, the courage to let something deepen without prematurely deciding it's too complicated. The version of me that almost left would have been safe, but safe isn't always fulfilled. I don't want to look back and realize I abandoned something meaningful because I was afraid of depth. So I'm choosing differently this time. Not recklessly, not blindly, deliberately. I was certain I'd walk away. Now I'm certain of something else. If something feels real, it deserves more than my fear. And this time, I'm not going to let fear make the decision for me. What staying actually requires of me. It's easy to romanticize the decision to stay. It sounds noble, it sounds brave, it sounds like the kind of thing people applaud. But staying isn't poetic, it's disciplined. And that's the part I didn't fully understand until I stopped planning my exit. When I chose not to walk away, nothing dramatic happened. There was no announcement, no confession, no emotional crescendo. Just a quiet internal shift. I closed the mental door I had kept slightly open. Closing that door meant something simple but heavy. Now I have to show up. Showing up isn't about grand gestures. It's about consistency. Consistency in tone. Consistency in attention. Consistency in emotional availability. And consistency is harder than intensity. Intensity is easy. You feel something strongly and you act on it. Consistency asks you to act even when you're unsure, even when you're tired, even when your ego feels slightly bruised. That's what staying demands. I started noticing how often I'd relied on emotional flexibility to feel safe. If something felt uncertain, I could lean back. If something felt slightly misaligned, I could slow down. If something required vulnerability, I could soften my presence. I was good at that. Good at staying disemboweled enough to enjoy connection, but detached enough to survive its loss. Staying means abandoning that strategy, not recklessly, but intentionally. I had to ask myself a hard question. Am I willing to be consistent even if it exposes me? Because consistency exposes your patterns. It reveals whether you're steady or reactive, whether you communicate or withdraw, whether you lean in or subtly retreat. I don't want to retreat anymore. But that doesn't mean retreat isn't tempting. There are still moments when something feels slightly off, a tone that shifts, a pause that lingers, a message that arrives later than expected. In the past, those small shifts would activate my exit reflex. I'd tell myself, see, this is the misalignment. Better to leave now. Now I pause, not to ignore the signal, but to evaluate it honestly. Is this a red flag, or is it simply two human beings navigating complexity? Human beings are complex. Depth is complex. Real is complex. Easy doesn't require interpretation. Real does. I'm learning that staying doesn't mean tolerating anything. It means discerning the difference between discomfort and dysfunction. Discomfort asks for communication. Dysfunction asks for departure. I've confused the two before. This time, I'm slowing down enough to separate them. Staying also requires humility. Humility to admit that I don't have perfect emotional instincts. Humility to recognize when my fear is louder than reality. Humility to say I may be projecting. That's not easy, but it's necessary. There's also vulnerability and consistency. When you show up regularly, you give someone a chance to measure you, to see if you're stable, to see if your energy fluctuates, to see if your words align with your actions. That exposure is uncomfortable because it removes mystery, and I've often relied on mystery to feel powerful. But mystery doesn't build trust. Reliability does. I'm realizing that staying is less about passion and more about reliability, not in a boring way, in a grounding way. Grounding creates safety. Safety allows depth. Depth creates connection. If I want real, I have to participate in building it. Not just feel it, not just talk about it. Build it. Building requires patience. Patience when conversations don't resolve immediately. Patience when misunderstandings surface. Patience when growth feels slower than excitement. Excitement is immediate. Growth is gradual. I chased excitement before. It burns bright and fast. It feels intoxicating, but it rarely stabilizes into something sustainable. This feels different, less explosive, more intentional. And intentional requires effort. Effort isn't forced. It's attentive. It's choosing to respond thoughtfully instead of reactively. It's choosing to clarify instead of assume. It's choosing to stay curious instead of defensive. Curiosity is an underrated form of love. When you're curious about someone's perspective instead of threatened by it, you create space. And space is what allows real connection to breathe. I'm also confronting my relationship with control. Staying means surrendering some of it. Not surrendering my boundaries, but surrendering the illusion that I can predict the outcome. I can't. I never could. Walking away early gives you the illusion of control. Staying accepts uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. But uncertainty doesn't mean instability. It means openness. Openness to growth. Openness to evolution. Openness to evolution. Openness to being surprised. I'm choosing openness, not because I'm fearless. Because I'm aware. Aware that my old pattern would have cost me something meaningful. Aware that growth requires discomfort. Aware that real doesn't always feel smooth. Staying also requires self-trust. Trust that I'll communicate if something truly feels wrong. Trust that I won't tolerate misalignment out of fear of loss. Trust that I can differentiate between vulnerability and red flags. That trust isn't blind, it's practiced. Every time I pause instead of retreat, every time I clarify instead of assume, every time I remain steady instead of reactive, I build it. She didn't ask me to stay. She simply stated what she values. And I had to decide if I value the same thing. The answer is yes. But yes, it comes with responsibility. Responsibility to not be inconsistent. Responsibility to not sabotage stability. Responsibility to not sabotage stability. Responsibility to not let ego override intention. Staying isn't glamorous. It's deliberate. It's choosing depth over ease. It's choosing growth over escape. It's choosing presence over protection. I was certain I'd walk away. Now I'm certain of something else. If I'm going to want something real, I have to be real too. Consistent, patient, accountable. This isn't about winning her. It's about aligning myself with the kind of connection I claim to want. And alignment requires action. Small, steady action. So I'm staying. Not because it's comfortable, because it's honest. And honesty, even when it requires effort, feels better than the quiet regret of leaving something real behind. The kind of man I become. If I stayed, there's something no one tells you about choosing to stay. It's not just about the relationship. It's about the person you become because of the choice. That's what I've been sitting with. Not whether this works, not whether it lasts, but who I am if I don't run. For years, I've admired steadiness in other people. The ones who don't flinch at depth, the ones who don't retreat at the first sign of emotional friction, the ones who don't equate discomfort with danger. I admired them, but admiration is easy when you don't have to embody it. Now I do. Staying has forced me to confront a quiet truth about myself. I've often exited before something meaningful could test me. Not because I didn't care, because I did. And caring creates stakes. Stakes create vulnerability. Vulnerability exposes ego, and ego hates exposure. When she said she wanted something real, she unknowingly held up a mirror. Not to my feelings, to my habits. She didn't ask me to commit. She didn't ask me to define anything. She simply clarified what she values, and I had to decide whether I'm capable of valuing the same thing in practice, not just in theory. It's easy to say you want real. It's harder to live it. Living real means you don't disappear when things get layered. You don't interpret every tension as a warning sign. You don't protect your pride at the expense of connection. It means you stay long enough to understand instead of leaving quickly to avoid. I realized something uncomfortable. Walking away would have preserved my self-image. The composed one, the discerning one, the emotionally intelligent one who knows when something isn't aligned. But staying challenges that image. Because now I have to prove I can handle depth without control. And depth without control is the real test. You don't get to script it. You don't get to predict it. You don't get to leave at the first moment you feel exposed. You have to stand in it. I keep asking myself one question. If I leave now, who do I remain? If I stay, who do I become? That question matters more than outcome. If I leave, I remain safe, untouched, untested, comfortable. But if I stay, I become someone who can tolerate complexity without retreat, someone who can communicate instead of withdraw, someone who can grow inside a connection instead of hovering outside it. Growth isn't loud. It's uncomfortable. It's choosing to respond instead of react. It's choosing curiosity instead of defensiveness. It's choosing patience instead of control. And here's what I've realized. The discomfort I felt wasn't a signal to leave. It was a signal to expand. Expand my capacity for vulnerability, expand my tolerance for ambiguity, expand my definition of what alignment looks like. Alignment doesn't mean frictionless. It means compatible growth. Two people willing to navigate discomfort without abandoning each other at the first challenge. I don't know yet what we will become, but I know what I'm becoming. Less reactive, less guarded, more accountable. Accountability changes the tone of everything. Instead of asking, is she right for me? I ask, am I showing up right? Instead of scanning for exit signs, I scan for growth opportunities. Instead of preparing for loss, I prepare for communication. That's new for me. And it's not easy, but it feels honest. There are still moments when fear whispers, when my mind suggests you could leave now and avoid potential disappointment. That voice is my gun. But it's quieter, because I've seen what avoidance costs. It costs depth. It costs growth. It costs the possibility of something steady. And I'm tired of costing myself steady things because they require effort. Effort doesn't mean forcing. It means tending. Like tending to a fire that won't blaze wildly, but will warm consistently if you feed it attention. I want warmth, not sparks, not spectacle. Warmth. She doesn't feel like chaos. She feels like foundation. And foundation isn't flashy. It's reliable. If I walk away from foundation because it doesn't thrill me instantly, that says more about me than about her. It says I'm addicted to ease. But ease has never built anything lasting. Lasting things are layered. They evolve, They test you in small ways. They require adaptation. I want to be someone who adapts instead of abandons, someone who grows instead of withdraws, someone who doesn't confuse vulnerability with weakness. Staying isn't about proving something to her. It's about proving something to myself, that I can handle real without sabotaging it, that I can sit in complexity without labeling it incompatibility too quickly, that I can let something deepen without controlling its pace. There's also humility in staying. Humility to admit that I don't always know immediately whether something is right. Humility to allow time to reveal instead of forcing early conclusions. Humility to recognize that discomfort sometimes precedes stability. And stability is what I want, not perfection, stability. If I leave now, I'll never know whether the discomfort was a red flag or just the stretching of growth. If I stay, I give it space to reveal itself honestly. And I trust myself enough to leave later if it truly isn't aligned. That's the difference. Staying doesn't mean settling. It means investigating fully before deciding. I was certain I'd walk away. Now I'm certain of something else. I don't want to be the man who leaves real things because they require patience. I want to be the man who builds them carefully. This isn't dramatic. There's no grand declaration. Just a shift in posture, a decision to remain present, a commitment to grow instead of retreat. Maybe this becomes something lasting. Maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't, it won't be because I ran. It won't be because I avoided depth. It won't be because I chose comfort over connection. It will end, if it ends, with integrity. And that's the kind of ending I can respect. I was certain I'd walk away. But she says something simple that reminded me of what I actually want. Not easy. Real. And if I want real, I have to be real too. Steady, accountable, present. That's the kind of man I become if I stay. And for the first time, that feels worth the risk.
When my mind suggests you could leave now and avoid potential disappointments, that voice isn't gone, but it's quieter because I have seen what avoidance costs. It costs depth, it costs growth, it costs the possibility of something steady. And I'm tired of costing myself steady things because they require efforts. Effort doesn't mean forcing, it means tending. Like tending to a fire that won't blaze brightly but will burn consistently if you feed it attention. I want warmth, not sparks, not spectacles, warmth. She doesn't feel like chaos. She feels like foundation. And foundation isn't flashy. It's reliable. If I walk away from foundation because it doesn't drill me instantly, that says more about me than about her. It says I'm addicted to ease. But ease has never built anything lasting. Lasting things are layered, they evolve, they test you, and require adaptation. I want to be someone who adapts instead of abandons.